Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Sleeks, here on the OH Report podcast called Tough Questions, where we ask these tough questions to local celebrities, etc.
Whoa.
First, I'll go ahead and welcome Brian Skoronsky, who's always here, looking good as always, and our local celebrity of the day, Chris Hershberger.
Thank you. That's really setting the bar low, guys, but I appreciate that.
It's our biggest guest so far.
Oh.
Yeah. This is pretty
So
intimidating.
it's all uphill from here.
Yeah.
Well, we just meant the 6'4".
Oh,
That's
yeah,
all
I'm a
I-
tall
yeah,
guy. That
we
makes
weren't talking
sense.
rank,
But I have a feeling, knowing you guys, that after the second week, you're going to do better than me. So you're going to be fine. Yeah.
This is week 3. Week 1 was probably our lowest. Week
Oh.
2...
It was just me and Mark.
Okay.
No agenda.
No agenda.
Ideas. We just sat down.
Just
with some
talk.
cameras
Yeah, really,
rolling.
yeah.
And
Sometimes.
look at where we've come. Now we got big time guests coming in here. So thank you, Chris, for making the trip.
It's my pleasure. I love talking with you guys. Mark with a C. Love you, man. I've known Brian for a long time, not with a Y. He hates that, just for the record. I'm looking forward to this, man. You know, I just like to rap.
Oh,
Right.
should we start there with a little hip hop?
Let's start with some rapping.
Okay.
I mean, what about the halftime show?
Right.
My
Yeah?
favorite.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's
of all
good.
time, and we always are prisoners of the moment, and we say oftentimes, I think, in sports in America, hey, that was the best that I've ever seen because we just saw it.
Yeah.
But I really feel like that was the most fun I've had watching a halftime show. I knew every song, the allotment of the talent that they had. It was pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, I danced more during that halftime than ever during like 8th grade dances in middle school.
And I know you can get down, baby.
Well, I've been known, I got some nicknames. I won't share them, but
Yeah, it's nice to get like something other than like 70s rock or 80s rock. I feel like that's most of the time what goes on there.
yeah.
So we didn't want to talk about, you give people a basis for this podcast. We're not going to talk about like what we do or like brand ourselves or any of that. We're going to talk about just normal questions that maybe somebody can learn something from and, get some good advice out. So, Chris, there was one interesting thing that we were talking about before this that I think we should probably get over. Like, you got stabbed?
Yeah, I did. And it was, it was a little traumatic.
At what age?
I was 13. I was almost 14.
So definitely traumatic.
It was traumatic, and I lived on the corner of 4th Street and Roland Avenue, which is a bit of a rough area. Still is to this day.
Right here in Mansfield.
The
In
true
Mansfield.
Mansfield.
True Mansfield. Yeah, I grew up in the ghetto. I don't think that's disparaging to say. Learned a lot from the ghetto. I grew up very poor, but it was a very violent community.
Wow, yeah.
And oftentimes I would walk down to what was then called Babcock's Donut Shop.
Let's go.
It then morphed into Dimitri's and now is an abandoned building. But it was a donut shop, and it had lots of Little Debbies. And as you know, Little Debbie was my first girlfriend.
Yep.
Been in love with her ever since. And I have a sugar problem. So with that being said, I was walking down there, and I had a $5 bill in my hand. And a gentleman, and I say gentleman because every gentleman stabs a person for $5, right? He approached me and said, "Give that to me," and I said no. And before I could even say anything, there was an imitation Rambo knife. I don't know if you guys, I'm a little older than you guys.
No, yeah.
But during that time, during Rambo craze,
Yeah.
they had these imitation Rambo knives that had the compass at the end. You pull it out and it had like fishing wire and all that kind of stuff in it. So one of those came in my face, and I was already a martial artist at that time. I started very young, so I did block, but it was a very long knife, and the tip caught me right in the lip. And I didn't know that I was stabbed because you're adrenaline dumping and that kind of thing. And I found out afterwards, but it was a pretty traumatic experience.
Like, I don't care how hard you are, stabbing a 13-year-old, like, should not give you any cred. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was 19 also. And to be fair, I was like 6'2" at the time.
Okay.
I was a very tall
Okay.
13-year-old.
No, that makes it better.
Yeah, it justifies the crime.
Right. You're a little squirt 13-year-old.
Yeah, and I said no to giving him my hard-earned money. I mean, of course, I deserved a knife in the face. But at any rate, I did disarm him and defended myself and didn't die. It was the first time in my life where I felt like my life was in danger. Someone was trying to actually kill me, so that was the traumatic part. It did take me to a place psychologically I wasn't prepared for because you never really are. And it taught me a lot of stuff.
So you just block and run?
So basically, no, I did a little more than that. I blocked, I disarmed, I punched his face, I kicked, I broke his rib, his jaw. I did a lot. I lost control.
Oh, to have that on video would be
Well,
amazing.
during that time, I think we were still playing Atari, so
Yeah, no iPhone.
Wow.
no evidence of that. But it did happen, and obviously my friends can vouch for that. And I was very lucky because we were training many members of the Mansfield Police Department during the time in martial arts, and I say myself and my instructor. So I knew a lot of police officers in town, and one showed up on the scene and said, "Get out of here," type of thing, because he knew what happened. I explained, but in most circumstances, I would have been arrested, even defending myself, and then I had to prove that this was was in fact a defense situation. So I was lucky. Like I could have really, because I did a bit of damage, because I lost complete control.
Sure.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you've learned to hone that. And before we go any further, just real quickly for anybody who may not know you, even though you are a local celebrity around here, you've been training in martial arts for basically your entire life. You brought it up even before you were 13. Talk to me about the initial introduction that you had to martial arts and then how your passion grew for that.
Yeah, it's really easy because I grew up in a neighborhood where we fought literally every day, every other day. There was always a fight, and we were always taking something from another person. So that, usually fights followed. You're just like, oh, that's a cool bike. I'm going to take that. You fight. That kind of thing. And that happened often. So for me, my first introduction to any type of martial art, because I do consider boxing a martial art,
absolutely,
was the Friendly House, under the late Henry, who is, Tony Hinshaw's father. He was an amazing coach. So I started boxing at the Friendly House when I was 8.
Wow.
I started pretty young. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I morphed into moving to the YMCA, which used to be right up the street from where I lived on Park Avenue. And then I just became a YMCA rat because it was like, oh, it's somewhere I can go and avoid people stealing my stuff and stabbing me and all that kind of stuff, right? So it was a safe haven. And I really, really liked to fight. And so it was a really easy fit for me.
So did the Y have a fighting or a ring? Or?
They didn't have rings at that time. We actually trained in the rifle range down in what was the basement. They had this. It was a long room. Clearly, that's what rifle ranges are.
Sounds safe.
Yeah,
you can dodge a bullet. You can dodge a punch.
Exactly. That was the rule of thumb, right? It was concrete floor. It was not, what we see today. Kids are pampered today, and this is not one of those I walk up a hill barefoot in snow stories. It's
but
literal.
You used to, right? I've heard.
I mean, I'm not going to bring that up, but I still have frostbitten toes, I should say, to this day. But no, it's like we trained. There wasn't the litigious society that we live in. Like I can't train students today the way I trained because I'd be sued the very moment I did that. So martial arts has changed dramatically from what used to be a very fringe, tough thing to more of a commercialized thing, and you have to be very safe with it and that kind of stuff. And I think it's good. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, you guys suck. I think it's a great evolution. Like we should not be knocking kids out in class regularly. The way that I saw it or experienced myself. That should not happen. It's not good martial arts training. Yeah. But that was what was happening at the time.
Probably what made you tough, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's no question about it. I mean, I'm not looking at it from an arrogant standpoint. It's more of a preparatory standpoint. Like, are you prepared for fighting? I always say that when people are like, oh, you're kind of tough. No, it's, are you prepared?
Yeah.
Because, I could be prepared for a one-on-one situation, but I may not be prepared for a 3-on-1 or a 4-on-1.
But can our generation ever be as tough as your generation?
Absolutely. I definitely think that because it's more psychological than it is abusing your body.
And we're learning maybe how to be tougher, too.
I think so. I think that the science behind grit is, Angela Duckworth wrote an amazing book, Grit, that talks just about this very subject. And what that means is you can train your mind and your behaviors and your habits to just have more grit. I think kids today actually have more grit. And I know that a lot of people my age would argue with that. But I think many kids are dealing with more things than we did. It was a much simpler time. Although it may have been a little more barbaric, it was simpler. Like I had my focus on these things. And whereas kids today, in my opinion, are like, it's coming from everywhere. So I think it requires a little bit more mental agility.
Yeah. I think that's 100% true. That nobody could foresee what social media was going to become and how you can connect with thousands, if not millions of people, all with one click of a button and see so many different thoughts and ideas all at one time in one place.
It's incredible. The information exchange today, and I'm an info geek, junkie, is unprecedented. I don't think we fully fathom.
I don't think we know. Right. We can't understand what we're going through right now.
Yeah. It's in the moment. Right? But it's one of those things from my standpoint where since I do take on a lot of information purposefully, it makes me very cognizant of what I'm putting in my, what I'm seeing with my eyes and and hearing with my ears because there's so much out there. It's like overwhelming.
So let's go to something else. So this is a big one. Let's think about this for a second. So like, what are dreams made out of? Like, is somebody's dreams, meaning like, you know, they're what they think they want to do, like, and may not be in the position to do it. Is it an obsession, or is it just a natural drive, or is it intellectual ability, or is it the, you know, I guess you know. For me, I think it was a mixture. I wrote those down because I feel like it was a mixture of all three. Like obsession, like to make your like obsession to learn. I think we have so much information nowadays, and it's easy to be a master of anything. And you know, college, you know, for unless you're going to be a doctor or something, like. Just for video, you know, working on video on the side, you know, I learned everything I did from YouTube. But like, not everybody can do that. Why not? Is it their lack of obsession, or are they stuck? How do you get out of the stuck?
I think, you know, there are so many great books out there about this very subject. And I think all of them are basically regurgitating a central message. And that message is, you have to clearly define your habits. We're all basically made up of our habits. Anything that we do behaviorally is based on our habits. Mm-hmm. And we all actively form habits every single day, and we don't realize it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think when you're talking about dreams are an abstract thing in our mind. That's where they start. You know, you're daydreaming, hey, I want to be in the NBA. Or, hey, I'd like to fly a space shuttle. That starts somewhere in the head. The actualization of the dream comes when you sit down and say, now I'm going to plan the process. And that's when you typically separate those that are daydreaming because they fall in love with an idea. That's what I tell a lot of clients and athletes I work with. You can't fall in love with the idea because that becomes a relationship in and of itself. And sometimes that relationship is satisfying enough for that person. They can live in it and go, I'm good with just the dream. The dream's fine.
Right.
And then they forget about the execution. The planning side. And that's where you separate those, going back to Angela Duckworth's book, The Grit, because it's hard to fulfill a dream. It's, you know, it's really easy to come up with it, or sometimes it's even easy to plan it out, but to execute. So for me, to answer your question, I think it requires a combination of those things, but more importantly, it's about identifying what it is you're truly trying to do, actionably.
And I think some people also get stuck on the risk factor of whatever they're trying to go into.
I can speak a little bit to the dream of forming what we have here. Oh, Arch Report now almost in the 4th year, and for me, the actualization was willing to put in so many hours and not get paid for a single one of them.
Yeah.
I did it for almost a full year, and I made basically no money. I was out there grinding on a daily basis. I already had been established with some of the coaches and the teams around here, of course, but I had to work without pay, and now it's become this because I was willing to put in the time, the dedication, and I had an action plan like Chris said, and I just started checking some boxes and going one by one. So for you, getting started with your career as a fitness trainer, what was the first step for you before you could take the second step?
Well, I often tell athletes and clients that I work with that the biggest ingredient to fulfilling a goal or a plan or a dream or whatever it may be is the person that, and you did this, you exhibited this, and this is why I really, and this is no joke, I know we joke a lot, but I use you as an example as a person that hustles. Like, you are a hustler. Like that's a huge attribute to anyone's endeavor, right?
Sure.
But I think it's important for people to understand that what separates you from another person really boils down to sacrifice. And that's what I tell athletes. It's not oftentimes what you're willing to do, it's what you're willing to go without while you're doing those things. And I can speak with my daughter. That was her biggest strength. Is she didn't bat an eye at missing homecoming or not going into the Friday night parties. And she had the choice. It was never imposed. Right. She didn't bat an eye. She understood very clearly that these are the things I have to give up to get here. And so sacrifice becomes a huge measuring stick when you talk about successful people. Right. But for me, as I started in the fitness world, I was already an athlete. I had a very unique perspective because I was what would be considered a world-class athlete in the martial arts world. So I was already going out seeking the best means of training. I was trying to get those tools to make me better.
Sure.
And while I was doing this, I was also training just regular people. So it looked like I was coming in with this amazing information. Like I was the first one in Richland County doing like martial arts, Taibo, kickboxing type classes. Nobody was doing that. But I, fused that together and created my own system based on that. And I realized that if you want to have an edge in any industry, but especially in the one that I participated in, you need to differentiate yourself, right? And so I had a nice fusion of the martial arts and the general fitness world because I was a strength and conditioning coach as well. So I basically blended those things together, and I got the best of both worlds because in my time especially, and this is again going to date me, but there was a time, guys, when you either just lifted weights or you ran on a treadmill or you ran outside. Those were the two alternatives in the fitness world. So in the 80s and 90s and well into the early 2000s, there had not yet been this unification of overall wellness. It was like you do this or you do that. Wow. And you still see remnants of that. Like you'll go to some gyms and you'll see the gym bros, right? That are in there and they're just like, cardio sucks. I'm never going to. That's the remnant of it. But it used to be that it wasn't even a question. It was like you're either this or you're that. So I brought a very unique blend and combination to the world. And that's what allowed me to start working with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and, bank presidents. And I really made my way into the personal training world because of that differentiation.
What risks do you think you took that kind of, like for Brian, he left his past job and started the OH Report. He had no other real option. When he started this, he's like, I have to make this or like I'm going to be working at a factory like 9 to 5. And so that I feel fueled him and fuels a lot of other business people to make it is that one solid thing is like he's in it and the risk is huge. Like everybody in Mansfield knows I'm doing this. I can't fail. What was your one moment where you had to take a step up? Was it opening your first shop?
Yeah, I opened up my first martial arts studio when I was 16 years old.
Wow.
So I had been hustling for a long time, but what really did it...
So you have an exceptional story.
Well, it was survival. So I didn't know any better. So what a lot of people don't understand, if you've ever read the book Bridges Over Poverty, it's a great book to give you an insight on what it's like to be poor and the challenges that come with that. And it's not as easy as pull your bootstraps up and, go... There are a lot of sociological things, psychological, all those things tied in that really play into that. But when you're in a situation where you are very poor and you have very few resources in front of you, you start to think that that's the world. You think that this is the planet I live on, and this is all I have.
That's brilliant.
I really have no choices but this. And you see this very small, myopic view of what the world is.
Yep.
And then, if you're lucky, which I was, and this is why I'm so blessed, and I thank God every day for this, I was exposed to what I would consider the more real world outside of that, which the martial arts gave me. And that was when, I'm 14 years old and having dinner over at one of the adults in the martial arts class at their house, right? I'm at their house having dinner, and I'm like, wow, these people are like talking and they're having dinner at a table and they're not fighting and throwing stuff at each other. And I mean, I lived in a very dysfunctional home, and people use that word. And this is not like a one-upmanship thing, but they use that word to describe minor things like, oh yeah, we have arguments. And no, my sister stabbed me, right? My brother and I fought daily, like fists hard. Like, and to this day, I'm not even associated with my family because I had to remove myself from that dysfunctional environment, right? Education was not a big thing. My dad was Amish. He ran away when he was 16 years old and was homeless, and lived in barns for 4 or 5 years. So he went to school to 8th grade. My mom went to school to 3rd grade from Olive Hill, Kentucky, like most of the people in Mansfield that have any type of Appalachian, heritage. So I didn't have to go to school if I didn't want to. I could literally stay home. I could just chill. And nobody got me up, no homework, no nothing. There was no value in education. What was the biggest blessing for me was getting in front of people that said, you have potential. And the martial arts was that potential. I was good at the martial arts. I was very tall. I was long-legged. I had limbs for martial arts and that kind of thing. So it exposed me. And that's what it's all boiled down to. It exposes you to a world that you never knew existed. And and this is going to answer your question, once I knew what that was, I didn't care what the risk was. I'll do anything to never go back to that. And I moved out of my parents' house when I was 16. I was still in high school. And I moved out because, it was very deplorable living standards, cockroaches and stuff like that. And the day that did it for me is I'm literally eating Kix. Is that cereal still a thing?
I think so.
I think so.
Is it still a thing?
Yeah.
And roaches are coming out of the bowl and in my mouth, and I'm throwing up, and I said, I can't do this anymore. Literally had a buddy who was 19, had an apartment. I lived in a little loft on Blymeyer Avenue until I was 18, and then I got my own joint at that point. But there was nothing that wasn't worth the risk at that point, because it was survival. It was like, I don't want to live that.
I feel like this goes really well with one of the questions I was going to ask. Like, I feel like there's to be someone that can hold their head up high, could be prideful of yourself and have a little esteem. You have to find a way to set yourself apart from other people. And one way I think you can set yourself apart and how you did, you kind of get cultured. In other ways, like you said, you can kind of be stuck in the same mind frame. And I don't think it's just poor people. I think it's like, a lot of people can just get stuck in this world that it just is so small. And I think, a little bit of culture can help in that degree. Like, you were probably traveling for martial arts a little bit. So that kind of, I already see where your culture comes from, because you're obviously cultured. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to put that in there as somebody, who we said earlier, it may feel stuck. It's definitely worth to expand your mind a little bit.
You can't be risk averse if you want to, in any way, shape, or form, evolve. Right. You cannot be risk averse. And I take that back. You can be to some degree. There's an intelligent aversion to risk, right? And that's what we all do when we look at it and go, well, let's estimate. Is this worth it? What are the downsides? What's what's the upshot? Whatever it may be. But you cannot be 100% risk averse if you plan to do anything.
Right.
You're literally dormant at that point.
Right.
And so you have to make a decision, is this worth it to me? It was an easy decision for me. Now, on the flip side, I had to temper that because I made a lot of mistakes, because I'm like, yeah, all in. Because that's how I was coming out of the hole of my life at that time. I'm like, I'm all in. But you don't have to have that attitude for everything you do, because it's actually unintelligent to do that. You have to measure and weigh things a little bit more. So it took me, my 20s was like trial and error on steroids. Yeah. It was like, okay, how many mistakes am I going to make here?
Yep.
And just keep going. And then finally, with the blessing of having great mentors and people that see potential and go, yeah, you should do this. And I tell people this all the time, and I don't want to stray too far from the question, but if you're not actively going out and seeking mentors, you're losing. I believe that. Oh, and I'm mentored by people that are your age, or there is a 22-year-old kid that mentors me in certain areas, in the social media and stuff that I can't connect with. Mentor me. But if you've got this egotistical mindset, like I know, I got it.
Right.
It's easy to do, but if you've got that, you're behind.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's so beautiful what you just outlined too, that age doesn't necessarily matter. Each human being can offer something different to you, and if you're open-minded to learning something from somebody else, there can be so much value in that. And to piggyback a little bit off of Mark's question, because you've traveled a lot. You've been to more countries maybe than anybody who lives in Mansfield. You probably are the most traveled person that lives here.
There's a good chance of that, and I'm not saying that in a bragging fashion. I've been to every continent except for Antarctica.
Correct.
And I don't want to go there because it's colder than this office right now.
So, and it is a little frigid in here. That's why Chris got the gloves on. But given what you've seen in your world traveled, and I know that you've done more just outside of the martial arts, you've traveled into communities and seen, what are some things that you've taken from other cultures globally that you apply to your life that we maybe miss out on in general here in America?
That's a really easy one, because there's something that sticks out. I was in Thailand. It was a dual purpose trip, and part of the trip was for a mission, and the mission was to basically rescue hilltop tribe young girls from the sex trade, from the that kind of thing, right? It was an enormously impactful experience for me.
Sure.
So when we did that, I was also going there to train in Muay Thai, which I love, and I spent time in this orphanage with these people that were just the most loving people I've ever experienced in my entire life. It was the weirdest thing, because we were there to help them. Like, we literally went to villages and paid village heads to say, we're going to take your daughter and put her into this orphanage so that she doesn't get trapped in the sex trade. And it was really eye-opening to me, because at the time I had a 7-year-old daughter, and it hit home with me hard. I was there crying. Like when I saw what was going on, and I decided at that point, like, what can I'm here to help, because we were doing like medical stuff. We were taking medicines and that kind of stuff. But what can I do? And at that point is when I decided I'm going to sponsor and do what I can. And I was really lucky, because while being there, the young gal that I sponsored was able to get to the orphanage. It was the day before we were to fly back to the U.S. And her mom drove her 8 hours on a moped.
Wow.
And I watched her mom drop her off. And this is really the culmination of my story. Drop her off to say, I'm not going to see you probably for a very long time, if not ever. Because I know this is good for you. And I bawled like a baby. I was like, oh my God. So to see that kind of love when I came back, it made me I was so empathetic to things I never thought I would be. Because I was like, wow, look, that's the power of love. These girls, we were there to help them, and I got way more out of it than they did, in my opinion. So of all my travels, that's the most impactful from a personal standpoint.
Just you need to feel love, compassion for everybody. You can't go in,
especially when you grow up in a rugged environment and you're taught to be very defensive, and survival it can be a very damaging thing. Like I'm still to this day resisting the urge to be defensive. Like it's a habit that I formed early on, and it's something that I try to temper, because when you're in that guarded position all the time, it's hard to love. It's hard to love people and give them that compassion that I think they deserve. So that was a monumental, trip for me. It was like, wow, it hit me. I mean, I really had some major epiphanies on how to behave as a human being at that point. And it really, I would say, out of anything I've ever experienced in my life, that's top 3 most impactful.
Well, to take a quick left turn, Chris, you mentioned you had a 7-year-old daughter at the time. One of the coolest, best people that I've ever met, your kid, Natalie, now 18 years old, right? Just
almost.
Turned 18?
Next
or
week.
About to get there?
Wednesday. Yeah, almost an adult.
So as a father, tell me about your journey so far, getting to this point where, you built up this fantastic athlete. Now she's about to become, 18-year-old, full-grown adult. What are you learning about yourself and then that relationship as it's evolved?
That's a hard one, because I'm in the middle of it right now. It's really tough, because I had to make a decision about a year ago to no longer be her coach. And I decided that I put all that I could into her. And I needed to, out of respect for her, she needed to be able to make her path without me holding her hand. And I tear up, because that experience was the best. I will never, ever be regretful of anything, because I had so much time to spend with my daughter that I never would have imagined. Like I never thought that I'd be able to travel the globe with my daughter and experience all these cool things and all the triumphs and the setbacks. And that's huge. Like I'm good. And that's what I told her, because she was a little apprehensive when I said it. I said, you're good. I said, you got this.
You're ready, young girl.
Yeah.
Get out there.
Exactly. You got this. But am I ready to let go? That was the big challenge, because you start to realize that, and this is a joke among, our circle in the martial arts world, I lost my identity for about 10 years. I wasn't Chris Hershberger, I was Natalie's father. And because she built up such a huge following based on all of her hard work and accomplishments. And I sat back one day, I'm like, wow, I'm not even me anymore. I'm Natalie's dad. It was so funny, because I joked in my mind, I'm like, guys, she's a lot more accomplished than I had ever been, but I did something.
Remember my medals?
I'm not just dad, So it was it was an ego thing. I had to kind of come to grips with that. But as far as the letting go, we're at that point, and I trust her. Like, I don't feel like I need to babysit her workouts or anything like that. She's there. We're just dealing with COVID right now, because everything's been canceled. Her first competition since COVID won't be until November of this year.
Sure.
So that's been a challenge. You imagine playing a sport where you just practiced for 2.5 years and you never competed. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
I give her a lot of props for sticking it out, and I think I would have quit personally. I would have said, good, I'll move on into something else. But it is what it is,
That's awesome. You guys have a great relationship, and one thing that I always respected about you is that you mentioned, I can't hold her hand anymore at workouts. You did a lot more than just hold her hand. You pushed her, and she never batted an eye, like you said. She appreciated the fact that she was dog tired, and you were making sure make that kick perfect for the camera right now.
Dogged. You experienced it. I mean, some people thought it was like a form of abuse because I was so persistent.
Borderline.
Yeah, exactly. Borderline. But, there's a story to that, and I'll really shrink this one. She came to me when she was 6 years old, and she'd witnessed her older brother, who's 3 years older, well-accomplished, 2-time national champion in his own right. She witnessed him and saw Big Bubby doing stuff, and this is what I want to do. I resisted. I was totally a male chauvinist, and I'm like, you do ballet. We'll teach you martial arts because I want you to be safe,
right.
But you're doing ballet. Nobody's kicking you in the face. You're my princess, right? So she just wore me down, nagged me, and then, long story short, she went from a yellow belt, which is the second belt in our art, to beating black belts, at her first tournament. And I was like, jaw dropped, like, oh my gosh, I have a phenom here, right? And I couldn't believe it. And I was like, wow. And she went on to win 9 national championships, 4 U.S. Open, the most decorated junior athlete, with the exception of one more, in the history of our sport. So she's well accomplished, but going to Brian's point, she did it. I showed her, but she did, and that's what I tell her. I'm like, look, you did this. Like, I guided you and I pushed you, and I know there are times you didn't want to, and I said, let's do it, but you took it. Like, you internalized it and you took it and you made it work. That's you. And that not every kid can do that. And then I go back to the sacrifice point. Not every kid can sacrifice all the things that we've talked about. They have to have those things because it's part of their identity. And that's okay. I'm not judging kids that do that. But if you want to do this, you got to take this path. So I've been super blessed with my relationship with Natalie. I love it even more now. It's crazy because I'm like, Dad.
Yeah, you got to disconnect
we hang out, and we just do fun stuff. We laugh together. I miss that. And that was the hardest thing about coaching Natalie, because I could have done a better job at times of changing hats. And there'd be times where we're at home and I'm like, gosh, I can't believe you missed that one.
Sure.
My advice to coaches, if you're coaching a child, is you got to have clear boundaries. I mean, very clear boundaries. If you don't, it will hurt your child. I can tell you that for a fact, psychologically, because it did Natalie. And it took a very concerted effort to repair those issues that we had at that time. So, but yeah, I feel blessed,
Back to the tough questions, Mark.
Tough question.
Throw a screwball here.
Still tough.
Let's go one more. Well, since we're in Valentine's Day, and in the words of 50, like the fire meets air, I won't burn unless you're there. What makes a good family man? What makes a good family man? The all-American man.
Yeah, I don't know because I'm not that guy. I can tell you that much. But I can tell you what works for me, and the thing that helps me understand that I'm never going to be a perfect husband or father. That's number one.
Right.
It is the act of trying to be perfect. It's the act of trying to constantly have self-awareness and self-evaluation in how it is you are dealing with people or interacting with people, especially your family. And we tend to treat those that are closest to us the worst. I mean, we've heard that. It's cliche, but it's true. We come home from work and we have that hard day and we couldn't let it go on the other people because why? They could sue us. You know what I mean?
Self-awareness is a big word, I think.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And so you come home and then you're like, okay, I got to vent to somebody. All right. All right.
Or how do you get your rocks off?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things where I think you really have to analyze how it is you're doing that behaviorally. Because if you don't, it can become very destructive.
And it's so hard to analyze yourself in those moments when you're stressed or when you're like, just living in the moment, just like, you're stressed and you're thinking and then you lash out and then you're like, gosh, how do I get to those times where I can self-analyze in those times when I'm most stressed and I'm not thinking about these
At least if you can do it after the fact, I think that's what's valuable and important. If you can have that self-realization moment where you're like, wow, I messed up there. I said something I wish I wouldn't have said. And if you can be benevolent from there and go give a hug or
Absolutely.
a kind word of encouragement.
Admit you're wrong. That's the big thing. Admit that you were wrong. There's nothing more powerful, in my opinion, for your kids to witness than for you to admit that you're
100%,
wrong.
yep.
That's a huge thing, because what it does is it enables them to understand that it's okay to bring your guard down and say, you know what? I make mistakes.
And that's America's the machoism of not admitting you're wrong, it was big, I think, in, fathers, they're just the perfect, or not perfect, but, they're just too masculine to, say any different.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you from my standpoint, the single best philosophy for me to be a better husband and father was to become a Stoic. Like I just dove in on Stoicism. I love the philosophy. It fits right within my worldview, that kind of thing. But basically what it teaches you is to not allow your emotions to control your actions. I mean, and there's much more to it than that, of course. But Ryan Holiday is our contemporary Stoicism expert. He has Ego is the Enemy. There's a ton of books that he puts out, but I always recommend those books because I think it's not just for men, but all people can learn to reel in those emotions and their egos and say, listen, we're human to human here. We're okay. Let's come to a compromise. We don't have to be defensive. I'm not attacking you. You're not attacking me, but we're all guilty of it. Like my favorite thing used to be, and I have to really tame this, is to debate. Why would I love to debate? Well, because I read a lot and it's based on facts. Like I don't read a lot of opinion. Like if his opinion is like based on fact, that's great. But I don't like a lot of opinion. So when you read a lot of stuff and somebody says some total BS, no pun intended.
I've been known to spew a thing or two, Chris. It's okay.
When someone says that, the act of thinking in my head that it is my duty, it is my right to correct this person, that's anti-Stoicism.
Yeah.
Like that's been the hardest part for me, because I'm like biting my tongue like you wouldn't believe, because it's not my right. First thing is, we know how easy it is to think that I can convince you to think like me. But we know how hard that actually is, right? At the same time, it's damn near impossible.
Sure.
If you have your stance, you're going to stick with your stance. The best thing that we can do is, where do we meet in the middle? Where's our middle ground? And let's talk about that. But I know you're not going to think over here with me. If you can start framing your conversations like that, you'll have a lot more success in interactions, in my opinion. And that involves with the family. That goes back to the family thing. Like conversations I have with my older son now. He's 19, will be 20 in May, or he's 20, sorry. He'll be 21 in May. And I'm now learning how to interact with a grown man. And to shed all of those notions of this is my young son. I have to let that go. It's hard because you're the guy that's been priming this young adult for his whole life.
I'm sure he reminds you a lot. Dad, I'm not 13 anymore.
Oh yeah, he just kind of gives me that that look. He doesn't even have to say it. He's like, kind of gives me that. I'm like, okay, you're right.
Noted.
Yeah, noted. And that's one of the hardest things. So if you don't mind, Mark with a C, I love to say that. I don't know why. Do you have children?
2, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Real young.
Like what ages?
Almost 2 and newborn.
Oh wow, so you
Two
are not
weeks?
sleeping.
No, I'm getting enough. He's a good baby. He's a real good baby.
You lucked out.
And they're breastfeeding. So I don't, I'm not like in the middle of the night, go goodbye. I'm like, I don't have that.
Have you been getting sore, or is it just?
No. See, like what I'm saying, like I'm actually pretty good at night. I don't know about my wife, but
and he pumps during the day.
Oh, he's a day pumper.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Okay, day pumper.
Well, I got one on my left, and then I got the pump on the right normally.
Multitasking champion right there.
Yeah, so you're like, I remember that phase, and I cherish those moments. Never take those for granted. Those are great times. And then you have Brian, who's like in the middle phase right now.
I got 13 and 6.
Oh, teenager! Oh. I can't believe she is.
And my teenager needs to come down to your place. She's right now going through a phase where she's involved in sports and stuff, but it used to be important to her, really. And now she's a little bit more, mellow and just, I don't know, Dad, type thing. So I think she needs a little kick, little inspiration from someone like yourself.
We love Aaliyah. She's amazing. She was in some of our summer camps, and she is such a smart and intelligent and just mature young lady. I can't believe she's 13. I think my hips started hurting hearing that. Just like, wow, 13. Seems like she was just 10.
Well, I think she was 3 years
She
ago.
was 3 years ago.
No doubt. No doubt. And the hips hurting probably because you just turned 47, my friend. You throw a lot of kicks.
I do. And that's one of the things that I really pride myself in with the martial art. I'm a lifelong martial artist. Like, I kick and punch a bag every day. And it's something that I've been doing since I was 8 years old. And it has helped me maintain a level of health that I'm thankful for. I can still do things with my almost 21-year-old son. I have an 11-year-old son as well. And I can work out with my daughter, who's a world-class athlete. Yeah. And that's what helps me. You know what I mean? So for me, that's my safety net, the martial arts is. So I feel like if anyone can find that, whether it's playing racquetball at the Y or whatever, I would always encourage people to just love something, enjoy it, and just be consistent with it.
I think you're 100% right. I've heard so many MMA fighters, boxers, or whatever say that martial arts basically saved them, or at least gave them the structure to continue on and live a fruitful life. And to your point, it doesn't matter if it's martial arts, as long as you find something active where your body is moving. I think it's so important to have that.
There's no question about that. And it can't be emphasized enough, because our society is becoming more and more sedentary with all the technology and everything. And I think that's one of my big passions too, is just, helping people become healthier.
Just move, baby.
It's transformation. That's what our business is about. I always tell when people say, well, what, you do martial arts and fitness? No, we're in the business of transformation. If you come to us at point A, we want to help you to B, C, D, E, F, G. And that requires time, effort. It requires trial and error. And transformation is hard. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're not transforming. They're stagnant at that point.
Well, please do. I think we're wrapping up here. Go ahead and plug your two spots. You got one that just opened up here, and what do you feel like you're bringing to the community? What do you guys offer?
Absolutely. So we just opened up a donut shop. It's on the corner. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll be there.
That'd be horrible, wouldn't it? After all that, we have a donut shop. No, we have, of course, Black Belt Pro Fitness in Mansfield. It's at 1099 West 4th Street. We've been there since the end of 2018. We train athletes that are trying to get on the Olympic team, to kids that are coming in that want to improve their self-esteem, self-defense, and all that kind of thing. And also, we had just opened a new facility in Dublin, Ohio. So that was this week. We're excited about that. We have an amazing team. My team at Black Belt, they're godsend. That's the thing that I'm learning now more than anything, is in the business world, is building a team. Teams, it's hard. It's like it's akin to trying to build that athlete. It's no different. You know what I mean? You're
going through the same thing, my friend.
You know exactly the thing. So in the business world, I read as much as I can. I try to learn from everyone else's mistakes as much as possible, because they're all out there. We live in the most profound time where other people's mistakes are disseminated to us at our fingertips. Like we just oftentimes don't pay attention. And if we can just pay attention to what they're doing so that we're not making the same mistakes, we win. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, and I got to give Chris one more little shout out. He was telling me that, I was saying, so he trains Olympic athletes. I knew he wasn't going to have like the average trainer, black belt, a first year black belt. He says all of his instructors have over 10 years of experience. So
Absolutely.
I just think that's a big fact people should know.
Thank you. And they're national medalists.
Right.
Most of them are, so that we don't bring in recreational athletes. Nothing wrong with those guys or girls, but we truly try to have the best.
Right.
So
it's just a different,
Appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Cool. Thank you,
Thanks,
Chris.
Always a pleasure with Brian and Mark with a C.
We'll have the heat on next time you come through, baby.
Thanks, guys. It's been tough questions.
Thank you.
We're out.
Yeah, that was fun, guys. Thank you.